Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
Welcome to Practical Bass, where each week we pick a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we look at it from some different angles and discuss it and hopefully bring some wit and wisdom that will help you take your gigs and your gear to the next level. That is our mission, and you're going to find it on our website. If you go to practicalbass.com, you'll find that printed in big bold letters, because that's what we're all about. We want to help you, and we want to also create a community and camaraderie with you, our listeners and fellow bassists. And that's why we hope that you will give us some feedback if you find the contact form on our website at practicalbass.com, or you can email us directly at podcast@practicalbass.com. Please feel free to leave us some feedback, some ideas, concepts, even if it's something you would like to hear us discuss in a future episode. We love to hear from you. We read all the mail we get. It's one of our favorite things to get listener mail from all over the world. It has been one of the highlights of doing this podcast. I still love it to this day. So I hope you guys will keep doing that and keep sending us ideas. We also hope that you will subscribe and share this podcast, and that you find us on social media and use social media to share it with others. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Google+, Twitter. I think we're on Tumblr as well now. So please do feel free to like and share what you find with your fellow musicians. So Dave,
Yeah,
we have a different kind of episode happening today.
We do.
Yeah. So normally I ask Dave about this, but this is one that I kind of feel connected to.
Yeah.
And we were asked by a listener about a particular topic. So
Listener mail.
this is listener mail. Listener mail. I love that.
I hear it.
I love it.
Yeah.
You will. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were asked by our listener, Paul Calloway, to talk about this topic. So in season 1, Dave and I had picked a player who influenced many, many people, James Jamerson, and we kind of dove into what we think makes them great.
Yeah.
And so Paul Calloway, our listener, wrote to us, and I'm going to quote to you from his email. He wrote, "Given all the influence Geddy Lee has had on me and probably plenty of other listeners, would there be any possibility of a similar podcast regarding his playing and influence on rock music and bass?" And I would say there is more than a possibility.
Right.
It is an absolute certainty, because here is that episode.
It's happening now.
It's happening right now.
in the now.
In the moment.
Boom.
You're in it. What's that? We're soaking in it. We're soaking in that moment right now. So, that was great. Great sound effect. That was great Foley work there, Dave.
You're welcome.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, well let's kick this off. So, for those who don't know, Geddy Lee is 1/3 of the band Rush, a band which I think it would be fair to say for many years had, I would call them high cult status.
Right.
Right. I would say they
Yep.
were definitely not a best kept secret.
Yeah.
They were huge. Concerts, were huge from the mid 70s onward, definitely incredibly popular, but yet always just below the surface of what you would find elsewhere. And maybe that's because of their odd time signatures that they would work in.
Sure.
Maybe it's because of the, very deep, pondering lyrics.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of Geddy's, very high voice in this sort of like kind of early Zeppelin-esque way of delivering vocals. And it could be their music was angular and different and not what you would normally call, for most of their work, radio ready or radio friendly, in the conventional sense. But yet they forged over 40 plus years of working together, one of the biggest legacies in rock music. And not only that, but three guys. This was just a power trio,
That's right.
Like the other great power trios,
Yeah.
you know, like Cream or something like that, you know.
That's right.
That you know, just three guys could make this much sound together.
Right.
And in doing that, also stay friends.
Right.
For over 40 years, actually
Right.
like 50 years, actually, because, you know,
Yeah.
Geddy and Alex, the bass player and guitar player, knew each other from childhood.
Yeah.
As you can learn, there's a couple documentaries out there I would invite people to look up. I think there's
a newer one,
there's
right? They
Beyond
kind of
the,
like,
there's Beyond the Lighted Stage. And then
Yeah.
I think there's another one, the name is escaping me right now, but
in general, they kind of like,
yeah.
they kept their rock star like lifestyle off of the front page.
Yeah. These are not guys who like went out and, you know, they weren't busting up hotel rooms
Yeah.
or snorting a fortune up their noses
That's right.
or whatever. These guys were, they were, you know, pretty mild mannered guys. I mean, you know, probably I would bet that the worst thing they ever did was probably like, you know, had a couple too many beers and passed out
Right.
in their hotel room, you know,
Right.
amongst themselves quietly.
Right.
Like that's kind of how I see them. I don't know if that really happened, but
Right.
I have no
I don't
idea.
know the story.
But that's
Yeah.
kind of like the worst
Right.
thing I can imagine them doing.
Yeah.
You know, but Geddy was the bass player, and I think some people, maybe a lot of people, would see him as kind of the, you know, really kind of the mastermind, maybe the
Sure.
driving force behind like, kind of like, if there was any one person who maybe kind of, you know, maybe held the business reins or just kind of like served as the focal point. I'm guessing it was probably him. He always struck me as kind of the guy who was, you know, the most ambitious out of all of them without being in any
Right.
way like a jerk or anything.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen the documentaries, but that's kind of what I get just from the interviews that I've heard. And actually like through the music, I hear it.
yeah. So, I mean, Rush went on to, you know, they've had, I don't know how many albums they've had now. I used to be the world's biggest fan of
Yeah.
theirs when I was young.
Yeah.
And I've literally lost count. Like, I mean, it's well over 25 albums
Right.
at this point.
Yes.
Right. And they've had, some of them are live albums. They've got,
They have like a
DVDs
studio
out
album
there.
that's like 80 songs or something like that. Like just that alone.
they've got like, yeah, well, I know there's collections
Which is after.
out there.
Yeah.
And
But that's
stuff.
80 like, and that's just post like late 90s or something.
Oh
or
yeah.
like,
Yeah. Oh,
or
easily.
early 90s. Like,
Yeah, it's not
just
like they
that.
stopped. It's not like they in 1989.
They did stop for a little bit, right?
They did. There is a whole story behind that because the drummer Neil, he lost in the course of like I think a year. He lost his wife to cancer, and his daughter died in a freak car accident.
Oh man.
Like one thing after another, and I mean, I think that would probably kill most normal human beings' desire to live, right? And this is a guy who went through, you know, he probably went through a period of introspection and withdrew from you know, life and music and everything. And then, you know, when things were right, things started happening again. And, you know, I think that's also a testament to the band is that, you know, the band's business of making music and money as musicians never was more important than that. Right. They were like the other two guys basically said, this by far, like this isn't even measurable on the same scale. Like what we might want to do in music or whatever has literally like that's so minute compared to what our friend is going through. We may may be the end of the band. That may be and that's how it is.
So pardon my
It doesn't
ignorance
even
to this.
matter.
So they didn't even get a sub. They didn't get a sub.
No, there's no.
They just turned it off.
That's it. No, that band is
Awesome.
those three guys, and that's it.
That's
And
actually super respectful.
yeah. And
that's
they've
amazing.
said, like they've said since, like this, there is,
Wow.
you know, the band is these three guys. There is no band without any one of these guys.
Yeah.
And I think that makes perfect sense. And I would call that like one of the most successful triumvirate partnerships I use the word triumvirate. I'm pretty proud of that.
That's pretty awesome.
That is like one of the most successful triumvirate partnerships, I think, that you will find in modern music, period.
Yeah.
Right there.
I'm going to write that in my journal tonight, by the way.
Triumvirate?
Well, that you said it.
Oh, okay. All right. On this day in history. So that was a rather lofty introduction.
No, that's cool. I think it's good to give the background for sure.
Yeah, because there are probably people out there who don't know about this band, and that's cool. You know, we're not. I don't think the purpose of this podcast is to sell people a band as much as it is to acknowledge, I think, a player that has had a huge impact on a lot of people. Yes. I know he had an impact on me. Yeah. Like I would say in my early years, as much as like James Jamerson or Marcus Miller, Nathan East, Chris Squire, Jack Bruce, anybody like that. All of those people had big impacts on me. Yeah. Geddy was one of the people I think I saw him as like kind of a kindred spirit in that he not only played bass, but he played keyboards. That's right. And he would do this. He would play like during one song, he'd be switching from bass to keyboards. Yeah. Sometimes he was playing bass and at the same time he's playing pedals with his feet. Right. That are like organ pedals. Right. You know, those chromatic piano organ pedals. Yeah. And singing on top of all this. Like he's also singing at the same time. Yeah. And that was definitely somebody that I looked at what he was doing. And not just singing, but singing like, I mean, I think his range was like 2 or 3 octaves. Like he was like closer to like the 3 octave level, if not there. He had a very high, he had a very, very high voice that he could pull with out. Intonation. Yeah. Like, killer. And to be able to do that live and, you know, and by the early 90s, you know, I had seen them a number of times, like a half dozen times. And, you know, it was, you couldn't believe my eyes. Like I couldn't believe there's this guy who's doing all this stuff, you know, in the course of one song. I'm watching him do all of these things very proficiently. And that would be one thing if it was like simple songs. Right. But these songs are like, they're changing meter all the time, very angular lines. And this guy, and all this is great, but what about the bass, Paul? What about the bass? Yeah. Well, this guy is like, he is yanking lines on his bass that are just insane. Yeah. All at the same time. I mean, it was incredible. Like I love, you know, one of my early influences before, you know, when I was a child, right? That like one of my big influences is Sting and still is today. Like when I write music, like it just, whatever, you know, it still comes through me and like the Police era, right? Yep. And you think about, all right, cool. There's a writer, a singer, composer, and a bassist. Right. But even though I love, and you know, I would never take this away. I love the bass lines, but the bass lines that he's writing are definitely like simplified in a way that it's simplified in an art where like it makes sense to what's going on with the vocals. Yeah. Even if it's like syncopated or whatever. Right. It's put to that level. As a bass, you know, I would say Sting, like he often was doing like, and it's not that he never did anything complex because he certainly did, but a lot of times he's doing these lines because they support the song. That's right. In a conventional way. Yes. He's supporting the song. Yeah. And I think if you look on the other hand, you look at like what Geddy does. Dude, you couldn't like, I think. Not even the same ball game. If you didn't know anything about Geddy Lee and you just plugged in any one of the songs, you would never guess that the singer is a bassist because you would say, how in the hell is somebody actually doing that? Right. Like I would challenge anybody to go grab a copy of, okay, so we're gonna like spin way out here, but you know, go grab like Red Barchetta or something like that. And you hear it's not that what he's singing is entirely opposite of what's happening in the bass. They're definitely connected, but at the same time, the bass is going all of these places that the vocal is not.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's like, it's crazy when you listen to that. Or
It is insane.
Marathon was always one of my favorites. And it's not a really well-known song of theirs, but they used to do it in concert a bunch in the 90s. And it has a very like power poppy kind of plucky, funky sound to it that it has nothing to do with what he's singing at all. And it's all basically like he's just so good.
Yeah.
Just muscle memories up that
Totally.
stuff and then just sings over it because he can, you know?
But so for me, these are things that like I discovered later because my first experience.
How did you first hear these guys?
My first experience with like, and I know that I heard some of the songs before this, right? But you know, we hear music sometimes and we don't associate who's playing it or whatever, right? When we're younger. Freshman year of college for me, mid 90s.
Yeah.
I put, I'm in a quad, right? Like I room with 4 people.
Right.
And I put, I like music. And that was it. That like, it was a handwritten sheet and that's what's going to place you. So I got put with 3 other guys that love music.
Yeah. Yeah.
I shouldn't have done that. Oh man. Ooh, that was a wild year. So here's the mix, right? I know this sounds off topic, but I'm going to bring it in. So, we, one guy, gosh, I should know his name, but I can't remember, and probably for privacy purposes, it's good anyways. Rasta J or something we would call him.
Rasta J.
Right? We gave everybody nicknames.
Right.
So he was like, he had his corner of this like cement, whatever, 15 by 15 room.
Right.
And bed, metal bed. And he was all about like Bob Marley, Grateful Dead, Fish, West Coast hip hop, like Dr. Dre, Snoop, all this stuff, Pink Floyd and his chill out moments. It was great. It was super like, this is all music that I've heard in the past, but it was like a lot of that, right? Yeah. He even had like the black light poster.
Right. Of course.
He even had that.
Of course.
Then like next to me was one of my best friends to this day and for many years, and jazz guitarist, still a jazz guitarist, like still in the workshop, like with monster jazz guitarists who don't even perform. They just do jazz in a room together.
Yeah.
Like the next level stuff. I'm like, and also he plays in a funk band. And his was like, at that era, was all about like, and I'm rapping, I'm bubbling this all together, but like a lot of like Blue Note jazz.
Yeah.
Right. Label stuff, all the Blue Note stuff.
Yeah.
Also like Eastern music. Right. Which is kind of tied to some of the Blue Note stuff, but all that like Eastern.
Yeah.
And then
it's really easy to move from like jazz to microtonal and whatnot.
And then he would also do like the Tribe Called Quest, right? Not the West Coast so much, but the Tribe side, right? That also sampled Blue Note. And then Parliament was like his Get Loose.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Make My Funk the P-Funk.
Yes.
Right? And then, and like for me, like I came in like the wild card, it was like Fugazi. I love like Minutemen or anything with Mike Watt in it.
Yeah.
Right? Primus. And I wasn't even playing bass at this point, mind you.
Right.
Hadn't even touched a bass in my life.
Yeah, you'd already like gravitated
Primus.
to it. It was in your soul.
I should have known it. Yeah. Oh, actually, like I'm getting the chills right now. I should have known. Like, of course I was going to play the bass.
Yep.
Jamiroquai, bass centric, right?
Yes.
All these Beastie Boys. And I was really into like fusion. Like I love like Stanley Clarke.
Yep.
Stuff like anything with like him and Chick Corea. Like, and then like Al Di Meola stuff, John McLaughlin, like all this stuff, right? But kind of across like, very.
So you got these 3 guys, and they're all like kind of bring their own little.
And then there was a 4th guy.
Yeah.
Nicest guy ever. Loved him.
Yeah.
Loved him. And he was like so gung ho. He was a guitar player.
Yeah.
Different than my other friend who's a guitar player.
Yeah.
He was 115% Rush.
Like this guy is the prog rocker, right?
He had like, he had, when All of Us Are Broke, he had like the pedal, like the multi-pedal boards that had like, when digital pedals were coming out.
Yeah.
With all the effects.
Yeah.
And he was so happy about this. he was so happy about the music, really. Like his joy for this music.
Yeah.
But it also came with the other two bands that he loved, which was Dream Theater.
Yeah.
And Hootie and the Blowfish.
Wow. Okay.
Right?
I wouldn't have pegged that, but okay.
Like that's probably the part that like took me for a spin. I was like, yeah, but like, and at the time I'm like, and don't get me wrong, like amazing musicians, but at the time in that era, I'm like, wait, and Hootie? Like it kind of lost.
Right.
Like I was like,
where'd that come from?
Yeah, where did that come from? And I would actually, like, I hung out with all of them and I spent a lot of time and I got a lot of Rush in at that point and I loved it. Like I really did, but I had so many other options.
Oh yeah.
That at that given point, all of a sudden Rush like took a back burner.
That withered, but some other things kind of took over.
All these other things they had more of like an organic kind of feel approach, right?
Yeah.
Of what at that point.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, that stinks in that regard. Like I always look back at that like, oh, that just like got past me. That's one band that's like a monster that like got past me until later on in life when then I like come back and I'm like, wait, who is this Geddy guy? Who is this Geddy that every time I Google like best bassist and like Geddy Lee pops up, I'm like, who is this Geddy guy again? I'm like,
Geddy Lee guy?
Oh, I get it. Yeah. He's a monster.
Right.
Oh, I get it. He's a,
Yeah. He's a killer.
That's my Rush background.
Yeah. No, it's good. Like, and so you kind of came into them as being like, this was definitely a musician's band.
Yes.
Right. Like as much as any of these other, groups were like, you might look at like Coltrane or you might look at like, I completely like blank. You described all of these so well, and now I just completely blanked on them. But
just as much as like you hear like Primus, is still, like all these, they're super. And the thing is it was like the technicality I wasn't ready for. Yeah, it kind of went over my head a bit.
But that is kind of like it's one of their trademarks that I feel like it is at once it's like a trademark, but it also is kind of there's definitely a little sense of it being like it's a little bit of a barrier.
Yeah,
it's a permeable barrier.
Yeah,
but you're not going to get into it by accident. Like you're not going to be like you're not going to be at the club. Knocking one back with your friends and you're like, who is that?
Who's that?
Rush?
Yeah.
What? Like, that's not going to happen.
Like, it's like many other high cult bands.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you
gain entry.
It is it's very highly stylistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has something. I mean, when you hear a Rush song, man, there's like, that's what it is. You're not like, I don't know. Is that Beyonce? No.
Yeah. Nope.
You know exactly.
That's when they throw you out of the club. They throw you out of the club at that point.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, so yeah, I got into them. I know for a fact that there were kids who got into them when I was in middle school and high school. Because I can remember back to seeing somebody's T-shirt. It was like a Rush T-shirt.
Right.
I didn't know what it was. I kind of registered it, but it never connected with me.
Right.
And the thing is that I was going through this like weird period in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where I kind of listened to nothing but classical music for probably a good 3 or 4 years, maybe more. And this is, I'm talking like 1982 or 83 to like 1987.
Right.
I kind of missed out on a lot of things that happened then. And I kind of missed out on those years where you really like, as a teenager, you start connecting with on a very visceral level.
Yeah.
With some kind of music, right, is going to really attach to you.
Yeah.
And for me, the weird thing is that it was classical at that time. So I knew like,
really?
I knew a boatload of Stravinsky.
No way.
But I didn't know anything that had a Stratocaster in it. Like that was like, it was, I
just learned that about you. Wow.
I was into that. Like, I mean, Stravinsky, Shostakovich, Tchaikovsky, Brahms,
right.
I went through a whole Mozart phase
cool.
for 8 months where that's all I listened to.
One of my best friends actually is like, that's how he was. We would play chess And then he would get so pumped about these like weird classical songs. And I'm like, I didn't get it.
I still to this day, like there are pieces that I just like immediately connect with at a really,
I hang out with weird people.
Stuff. You do.
Like you
that
included.
Includes me.
Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, there was this whole period where I missed all that stuff. So the way that I connected with them is not during that like that really formative time, but strangely, also in college.
Right.
So I had some friends who lived in the like our college dorm is like what they call a suite, and it was like 5 double bedrooms around a living area.
Right.
And
sure.
Like they go down a whole dorm like that, and the guys who lived in the not in the next room, but in the next suite from ours.
Yeah, Paul, I know what the suite is.
Yeah,
the suite is basically it was my room minus the suite. It was just one room.
There you go. You had just one room. We had like a bunch of rooms. We also had running water, and
we called ours a suite when we put sheets that hung from the ceiling down to the floor. Then it was a suite.
That's how you subdivided it into a suite. Nice. That's nice.
We did that. Yeah.
So, so anyway, these guys in the next suite from ours, one of them had one of their albums. He had Hold Your Fire, which is a later album. It was brand new at the time. It was like 1987.
Right.
So it had just come out. And I think if you were to poll like Rush fans, they probably like this probably wouldn't come in as one of their top albums or anything. Yeah. But I actually thought the songs were really strong.
Right.
They were really well written. They were more in a pop vein, and there was a lot of keyboards in them, which actually like helped. That kind of helped me. That production value kind of helped me get into that music kind of sideways.
Right. Because you love the production stuff too.
And I could still hear the bass really well in it. And the bass was like, once I finally could tell, oh my God, that's the bass. That's like this one guy playing bass. And I was like, holy crap. And then when I read the liner notes, I'm like, that's the guy who's singing and he did all the keyboards? Are you kidding me?
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And it's actually, like, to me, the music is very highly composed.
Yes.
So it has that, it doesn't sound like classical music. Right.
But it's also not jam. It's not a jam. It's
very, there are parts and there's movements within some of the pieces that are like epic and bring down. And sometimes those are just like vocals with like very little instrumentation. And
yeah. So, I mean, that was the thing that basically got me into it. And then that is the reason I bothered to check out the other record this guy had in his collection, which was Moving Pictures, which is like, that's considered one of their masterpieces.
Sure.
Right. It's got Tom Sawyer on it that everybody knows. Like they play that on rock radio all the time now.
Which was written by Geddy.
Well, yeah. Like, well, so I think all the songs, like Geddy and Alex wrote the music together for almost everything. And then the drummer, Neil, wrote the lyrics.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Huh. Although on that, there were a couple songs where I think Neil had a friend who co-wrote some lyrics with him. But you know, that's pretty much how most of it worked. All the like, you can look in their albums, and most of it says like music by Lee and Lifeson, and you know, lyrics by Peart or whatever.
Right.
That's just how they rolled. They kind of all had their role, and they knew what their role was in the band, and they just like, you know, went to town.
Interesting.
And so anyway, like listen, and then when I listened to Moving Pictures, that's when my brain exploded.
Sure.
Because there's not all that production and all those keyboards all over everything. So you really hear the individual instruments going on there. And there's some keyboards. But it's like monophonic things mostly. Some of it's polyphonic, but most of it is like, you know, just parts here and there.
Yeah.
And most of it is just them rocking out with all of like the rock juice that you can squeeze out of the volcano. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that just like my brain exploded at that point. I'm like, this is incredible. And then after that, like as quickly as I could earn money in my part-time job, I was sinking it into like buying all of their albums.
Right.
And that also turned me on to other progressive rock at the time. Like, and the funny thing is nowadays, I am definitely a guy who is not really into progressive rock. Like that was definitely not something I held on to. I still love listening to Rush sometimes, and they got me into things like Yes and King Crimson and stuff like that. And then that got me in like sideways to Genesis, and that took me to Peter Gabriel.
That's
you know, and all of this other stuff. But I would say that is a portion of my music that I kind of like at some point I took most of those rock knickknacks, the prog rock knickknacks, and I packed them up in a box. And I closed it up and I put it under my stairs, right in the little extra room. And I take it out every once in a while and go through it. And but it's really not it's not like I didn't hold tightly onto that anymore. But I do absolutely treasure what that taught me, because I think right from the beginning as a bass player, because this was right around the time, like this was the year that I started getting into the idea of like, I think I want to play bass, because I got into Rush and then Yes. And I'm like, I can't believe that bass, being a bassist can be this. I want to have a piece of that. And that's what got me into it. And I will always to this day be grateful for that, like light shining, which came at a perfect time for me, right? And, you know, it gave me a bar to shoot for. That at the time, it was really, really helpful, right? And at the same time, realizing that I don't want to play, like, that wasn't the only thing I played. I think I knew enough, because I had been trained in music before that for many, many years, to start easier. So while I listened to that, it wasn't all I did. Like, oh, I want to play just like this guy.
That's the difference, right?
You know what I mean?
Because for me, it was like, at that year when I first started playing bass, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it was like the hot bassists that were out there right at that time was like Victor Wooten and then Primus.
Oh, yeah.
Right, Les Claypool, who Les actually, this is one of his influences.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, huge Rush.
And Jamerson is an influence to him.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed,
like, if you start looking at this chain of where...
Here's the crazy thing. So I actually got, there's a, probably people know about this. I think his name is Alan Slutsky. He wrote the book called Standing in the Shadow of Jamerson. And that is actually the book that prompted later the documentary Standing in the Shadows of Motown, which hopefully some of the people in our audience have seen. But this book that Alan Slutsky put out was accompanied by a CD. And in it, you heard all of these famous bass players recreating James Jamerson's lines in famous songs. And Geddy Lee was among them.
Oh, come
because
on.
He went and
I
sought
didn't know
out.
that.
Oh, yeah. He went out and sought out all of these bass players who were like, they were influenced by Jamerson. Jamerson was an amazing, we talked about this last year in season 1. Jamerson was an amazingly technical player. He came out of an upright background, a classical background, a jazz background, and he could do amazing things on this, what was then a fairly new, recent instrument, the electric bass. And he took it to the next level because he could play these incredibly intricate lines, which if you hear them now, all you need to do is you could put that bass and the singer singing their vocal on top and the whole song is there.
It's there. It's
you
all
can
laid
hear
out.
everything there, because that was the kind of architect he was. And he influenced guys like Geddy, right? They heard the bass doing these things. They're like, I want to do that.
That's similar.
And then they took it in a different direction.
That's the thing, though. Like, that's what I hear when I listen back to Geddy lines. Like, it's that architect thing that you're saying. Like, that's what it is that he's writing for his vocals because he's the singer, and you could just hear how his lines are like, man, they're creating like a perfect platform for vocals, for drums. And it's taking this like 3-piece into like a machine, like this huge force.
Yeah, it just brings it into like it's like the thing that ties the harmonies and the textures of the guitar to the percussion of the drums. And it's just like it basically like weaves the web between them that makes those songs so amazing.
So here's the thing for me, like when I think of Geddy, the things that I take from it is like it is the singer composer bass thing for me. I think that this trifecta is so huge.
Yes.
When you think of like the Paul McCartney, the Sting, Geddy is like right there where and they're just like machines at doing all of that they're no longer just bass players.
Right. They go beyond just the simple role of I'm going to support the song to I'm actually creating
I'm going
to
be the song.
Like, yeah.
And that he was such a like all three of them must have like I don't know the story, but you just have to assume that for being in a band for so long, he has to be a good guy.
Yes.
Right? Like your head has to be in the right place.
Yeah.
You're not somebody that's like burning bridges. You're like level-headed.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with relationships, and that has everything to do with practical bass, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole like let's make this thing work and
it's not just the fact that this guy's a great musician that got them where they are. What got them there is pairing that with, using your sensibilities, right? Having a knack for building relationships,
right.
Being grateful
That's
for the
right.
things that happen to you.
That's right.
Being willing to go that extra mile when it's hard, and always sharing that with other people. Like never saying, "Hey, I'm the guy who's the star here," right?
Yeah.
It's not about me; it's about us.
You know what I love
Being
is
able
that
to do that.
Like they have a big production piece also.
Yeah.
He's involved with all like the production piece.
Oh yeah.
Like he loves that side of it.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's a very telling.
Yeah.
It fits right in like the practical bass spectrum of like, these are things you do. You get involved with like aspects around what you're doing.
You
take an interest in it, The other thing though, like from a strong perspective, like getting more into like the music side of it is that like, I find there's a lot of, maybe it's because of like the similar kind of scope around Geddy Lee is that like when I think about how I play rock, there's a lot of things that I do that are like Geddy Lee.
Yeah.
Like my style is like that. Whether, and it wasn't intentional, but it's because of all the things that are around it. Like people that have influenced him and that he has influenced have been within my sphere of influences. Right. Which is like, you start to get into this huge circle, this huge sphere, and it's his approach, his attack of like these like nice melodic lines.
Yeah.
And then his sound, like honestly, his tone to me if you think of like rock bass, he just seemed to nail the rock bass line.
Yeah.
He's got this like overdrive. It's like this like Tech 21, like overdrive.
Yeah.
Compressed in a way.
Yep.
Like with like a little bit of mids, mostly like highs and like lows, and then doubled with like this like lower low that sort of like rings underneath.
Yes.
Just this like epic bass line that is just an orchestra in itself that when you just hear it on its own, like the
tone,
forget it.
that
forget
tone
it,
is
man.
like,
whether you
incredible.
love it or you hate it, like you can't help but just keep listening to it.
It's undeniable, like that is he has a signature tone that's developed over the years. Like it's very in the earlier days, like 70s or whatever, early 80s. It's very kind of there's kind of a fuzzy quality to it, which is very, very cool, and it's this very kind of grindy quality, but in a sort of fuzzy 70s way. But then as you get into their later, especially get into their later albums, like late 90s and 2000s, it becomes incredibly punchy, well defined, and very like aggressive, but in a surgical way.
Right.
That when you hear it, you're just like, it is one of the most powerful bass sounds. Like when I got one of the records that I think was a real return to form for their sound, just for the sound, not necessarily for the for everything else, but I feel like the just the overall quality of the sound. The Counterparts album for me, like there was much more of a rock sound happening there that I really loved. There's this song called Animate that on there on Counterparts, which is, I think, one of the best songs that they've ever written.
Yeah.
Just in terms of it just connects at a really visceral, like balls out rocking level that I think they have songs that have done that, but that song, like in a very special way, I think like really took that to the next level. And the sound of the bass on that record, just like it's just killer. It's like everything.
Yeah.
I think, the thing about Geddy the thing I associate with him is this sound that he gets is just, and it all comes from his fingers. This is the thing.
Right.
Geddy doesn't play with a pick. When I got that Counterparts album, I thought, did he start playing with a pick? And the thing is, no, he didn't. He actually, had developed for a while this sound from his fingers. He actually had apparently something happened to one of his fingernails when he was, many years ago.
Okay.
And he kind of just grew, his fingernail never really grew back right. It grew back like this kind of
into the skin,
this kind of monstrosity, a real thick nail.
Thick. Okay.
And he kind of cultivated that into this a tool that he could use. So he gets this very aggressive pick-like sound that it's coming from his fingers, but it's coming because his nail is grabbing the string too and kind of giving it this extra little attack that you normally would get from a pick.
I may be wrong, but I feel like I've seen videos on the whole almost like a flamenco style.
Yes. Yeah. That's another thing he does. That.
A back and forth.
He started doing that
which is what you do with a pick.
Later
but he's
in life.
doing in.
Yeah. He started doing that later in life because he found that he could flick his finger back and forth, get the same kind of speed out of it without having to work so hard.
Yeah.
Which I think is, it's brilliant, do what works for you. Cause you're not always going to be able to play electrically fast. Yeah. As you get into your 50s or your 60s as a player. And he started using the tool to come up with a method that worked. And so, it was this flamenco style where he's picking backwards and forwards with that index finger at times to make that work.
Yeah.
And it's and it makes an incredible sound.
Right.
And, when I saw him do this live and it was all in his hands, I was like, oh, I'm in,
Yeah. And singing.
Sign me up,
Yeah. And singing.
I mean, just there. I mean, there's so many things we can say. I mean, we can go into all. I mean, there's too many albums to go into, but these guys have had, the band on the whole has had an amazing influence on musicians worldwide. But I would say, Geddy is, he's widely considered to be, certainly in the top 10 bass players of all time. That goes without saying, and I think you could make a case for top 3, right? Yeah. And I would guess the other 2 would be Jocko and James Jamerson. I think would be the other 2 for me. I don't know who everybody puts there. Those are my personal picks.
I mean, I think when you get to, for me, here's my my closing argument is that it is highly stylized.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. And while I dig
very
the voice.
Individual. It's individual.
The voice is a lot, right? You could love it or you could hate it. Yes. And that's why there's a dividing line. There is a cult following for it, right? Yeah. And that's because of the highly stylized aspect of it, right? Some people hate Fish, some people love Fish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Great musicians. The thing for me is that what he did with the bass was amazing. He was inventive. He is inventive. But he also created he built our bass world. He's part of the thread of what has built bass, has put bass on the front line.
Part of the architecture of what we consider to be modern bass. He built a big part of that foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
Love it or hate it.
Those guys.
And if you're a bassist and you're learning the instrument, you should go through at least you should go through the repertoire.
You owe it to yourself to go give a listen. And I mean, I would say, for me, you can start with things with definitely. I mean, Moving Pictures is without a doubt, I think most people would consider a masterpiece of classic rock, period. And it is definitely one of, if not the best, then one of the best Rush albums. I would also say you could, and I'm not sure if all fans would agree with me, and that's okay, right? We all have things that we love and don't love. I really loved in their modern phase, I really loved Power Windows, which I thought was an amazingly well-produced, it was a beautiful sounding record that I still love, like sonically, I love listening to nowadays just because it's crisp. There is a lot of keyboards in it, but you can still hear a lot of the instrumentation, like Alex's guitar was still out there. And there's a beauty to the songs that I really think holds up over time in the way that some of their other later albums don't. If you want to go super modern, I would say look no further than their most recent album, Clockwork Angels, which I think is probably the best thing that they've done in 10 years easily. It was an amazing tour, but it was an amazing record too. And I would challenge anybody to look for like playing that outplays these guys. Like literally 40 years on, these guys are like, they're 60-ish. And they are playing as well as people half their age. Like they're like they're literally blowing other musicians out of the water. Right. At double their age. You know what I mean? Like what are you going to say about guys like that? Right. Seriously. So I would say any bassist, you really have to check out the whole catalog. Those are a couple places you might want to start, see if any of those tickle your fancy, and see what you think. And
you don't have to love this style, but you have to at least like respect the time and the art, and
you got to give the respect.
It's just that thing, you know?
Yeah, you got to give the respect. I mean, they definitely bring the rock juice, like I said.
Yeah, I'm glad that we had some listener mail on this. That was definitely cool for me. I enjoyed that.
Paul Calloway out there, I hope that I hope our discussion met with your approval, and I hope that if you're not a fan of Geddy Lee or you're not a fan of Rush, then I hope that this still connected with you on some level. If you don't know these names, go check them out. Check out some of the associated artists, right? It's a great way to grow yourself, like grow your breadth as a musician and what you're exposed to. There's like a language among musicians that, these guys are a big part of, and knowing it is like, it's the key to a couple kingdoms that, you might like to traipse around and have an adventure in one day on your own. So we definitely encourage you to do that. So I guess that probably wraps it up for us for this week, and we would like to thank you all for joining us. We can be found pretty much everywhere on the web. One of the ways to find us is at our website, practicalbass.com. You can send us feedback there. Let us know what you thought, plus or minus. Do you have somebody that you think we ought to cover? We're interested in hearing about it. We'll be happy to discuss any player. We're happy to dish here. We don't know any of these people personally, unfortunately, but we'll tell you what we know and what we don't know.
That's right.
And also tell us, if there are other topics you'd like to hear covered, if there's gear topics or instrument topics, anything that you're interested in of a practical nature, we would love to do that for you. So you can also email us at podcast@practicalbass.com. You can also reach out to us on the socials, Facebook, Google+, Instagram, Twitter. We're even on Tumblr nowadays. And say hi. Send us pictures of you with your gear. Send us pictures of you with your album collection, whatever it is. Right. We'd love to hear from you. We also hope that you will subscribe and share. It's easy to subscribe. If you go to our website, practicalbass.com, all the instructions are there, but it boils down to this. Podcasts on your iPhone, iTunes on your Mac device, Google Play, or Stitcher Radio on any platform, or really just about any podcatching app out there. Search for Practical Bass and subscribe when the link comes up. You get a fresh episode delivered to you every week. It's absolutely free, and it always will be. So we would love to have you aboard for the ride. And second, please share this with your friends. And we hope that you'll share it not just, hand to hand, even though that is fantastic. And we love that. Every listener makes us happier, but also share it on social media. Let people know that we're out here and broadcasting for them. So please share it around with the musicians that you know, Facebook groups, wherever is appropriate. We would love to have people aboard this fantastic ride of bass. So until next time, I'm Paul Fields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
This has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening. So now every time like something weird happens, I like turn to the kids and I'm just like,
is that from the dark
web? I don't even say is that, it just dark web. Dark web.
They're like, oh god, Dad.
I'll let one rip and then look like by accident and look at the girls. I'm like, dark web. Parenting 101.
Father of the year, I keep telling you.
If you flatulate, respond with dark web.
Blame it on the dark web. Blame it on the dark web.
Remind me never to do a podcast on parenting.
We need that little like music under this. You know, like the little 50s song that's like ding 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 ding.
Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I've got to find that. That needs to be out there. So I'm sure that's on YouTube somewhere. I've got to find that song now.
Yeah,
I'm going to be obsessed with that tonight.